When it comes to EVE Online, every player wants to know the most effective tactic available. You want to know the meta. The meta controls everything. It determines what will and will not happen. Knowing the meta will alter your views, make you question your reality. It might even make you laugh. And now, you're part of it. You're watching The Meta Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Meta Show. Today is August the 13th, 2022. And as part of our ongoing experiment with having other people than Merc and the Mitani sitting next to me on the show, we have Dunk Dinkle along with us today as our guest co-host. Hi, Dunk. How are you?
I'm doing well. To alleviate all the questions in chat already, yes, I was already out inspecting the bees this morning before the show, so they're doing fine, and now you can all rest easy.
Excellent. And not only are you inspecting bees and hanging with us today, you are rocking a Pokemon jacket, which I am very impressed by. And let me just tell you, that's it. I see Squirtles, I see Pikachus, I see everyone is happy. And along with us today, in addition to our dear friend Dunk Dinkle from Brave Newbies, we have the one, the only Mr. Noisy Gamer, one of my absolute favorite talking heads in the EVE community, because this guy brings the numbers, which is always important. He was kind of like Angry Mustache before Angry Mustache was Angry Mustache. So we're happy to have you here. Noisy, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Oh, glad to be here.
Well, last time we saw each other was Vegas, right? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's like we were eating, what was it? We went to lunch or something, I think.
Yeah, that was the last time I remember seeing you. It was a couple of years ago. So I'm glad you're back. All right. Today, the point of the Today Show is to talk about the state of EVE Online. Now, we talk about this every week in a variety of ways, but let me tell you, we had a nice conversation that was kicked off by my dear co-host, Dunk Dinkle, earlier in this week with a long blog post that he wrote talking about the state of EVE, in which he said the state of EVE was meh. Now, that's not anything I think is surprising to anybody who watches this show, because if you've been watching this show for a while, we have been saying similar things and have had similar concerns. So I want to turn it over to Dunk. Dunk, tell us a little bit about this article and your perspective, because I think it's pretty interesting, and I'd like to go through it with you in a little more detail. Let me throw it up on the screen for the folks who have not seen it, and then I will link it to you in the chat, and I promise it will not be Pancake Cat. Here we go. All right, there it is up on the screen. Dunk, so you wrote this. What's your deal? What do you think the issue is?
Well, I think, you know, what I'm seeing is probably what a lot of people are seeing. You're seeing just simply less people in the game. I think we can debate whether there's less enthusiasm in the game, but definitely to me, it feels like there's less enthusiasm in all the different play styles about what's going on. And while it's easy to talk about minor changes to the game, the point of my article is to say there are some macro things going on in this game that I try to point out in this article that are very difficult things for CCP to resolve. I've been on the CSM. I know these kind of things get talked about. Solving them is very tough, but it's been several years since I have been on the CSM, but I haven't heard from other CSM members anything different than, you know, they're still struggling with these big issues and kind of dancing around the edges with small fixes. So, you know, the big secret, if you don't understand it, when I'm writing these articles, in a lot of ways, I'm writing them to CCP for them to hear it directly. It's not just for the players. And so I hope this kind of cuts through some of the internal chatter they have. When they read Reddits, it's usually about small things people want fixed. And I'm talking about the big thing of the player count's down, the economy's not going the way the economy should go, and we're not seeing an influx of new players, which could help mitigate the loss of the older players that's inevitable. So that's what it was about, just what are the big things in the game.
And that, I think, is an important point, because I think There are a lot of times when we in the community talk to each other, and we were pretty good at that. We have our talk shows, we have our Discords, we have our Eve, we have the forums, we have plenty of places to talk to each other. There aren't that many places for people who are not on the CSM to talk directly to CCP. So what they tend to do is write long, detailed posts and put them on a website or put them on our Eve. Typically on our Eve, that doesn't work very well because the average attention span of your Redditor is about 0.5 milliseconds. So if it's not a meme, you're generally not going to get a lot of people paying attention unless it's something that is such a big deal that everybody pays attention to it. And they didn't really read the article, but they know what the headline said and they like that, so they upvote you. But the bottom line with Dunk's post, I think, he's talking to the company because he is one of these players of a certain stature, I should say, that can go out there, that has credibility with the developers, credibility with the team, because he worked with them for a year and he knows these guys and they realize he's a professional and so are they, and he can speak the language. And that's what a lot of this was about. And I think some of the things that in here that I thought that some players kind of took personally, but shouldn't have, included things like under the section talking about the game gives players no reasons to fight, which is 100% accurate. You know, CCP is wholly relying on players to keep things going. And what gets...
Well, I think what I'm trying to point out here is CCP as a business is relying on marketing to help bring in new players.
Correct.
And the way you get new players is you hit these gaming sites, you have stories that are told about you that get in the news. And the just truth of the matter is the things that make it onto the big sites where they're going to attract new players are the things about the large scale warfare that goes on in the games. Very rarely do you see any kind of article about, hey, I killed a blingy cruiser on a gate, which I'm not trying to say this to denigrate that kind of play style. It's just the truth of marketing is they need player wars to get marketing, which attracts new people. And that's a difficult thing to keep going, right? The wars are not driven by CCP. They're not the ones triggering them. It's grudges people have that are triggering them.
Right.
And that requires enthusiasm and all the things that seem to be on the wane right now. I mean, if these wars in the North and South were happening now, the player count would be even less than it is, which is really a scary number to look at.
It is. I mean, we'll look at it right now. The number is 21,700 people playing the game right now. This is 4 o'clock Eastern Freedom Time. It is 2000 Eve. This is prime EU time zone. It is getting to be prime US time zone on a Saturday, and we're at 21,000 people. This should be in the 30s. Typically, this would be in the 30s. Now, Sunday is always Eve's best day. And sometimes on Sundays, we can get into the 30s again, but it's been a while. But the reality is, and to Dunk's point, and I want to put a finer tone on this because I get this crap all the time, and it frustrates the hell out of me. To all of you small gangers out there who get very upset every time someone like me or Dunk or anybody else in nullsec points out that the articles that are being written on PC Gamer and Kotaku and things like that are about the big fleet fights, that's not us saying that your stuff doesn't matter. What you do is everyday Eve. It is fundamentally about what the game is about. So no one's writing articles about somebody running Molten Core in World of Warcraft. Everybody does that every day. Going on a small gang roam and killing a bunch of stuff. That's the standard Eve playstyle. That's what everyone does at some point, unless you're like Noisy and then you never PvP, right? But the point is that's not newsworthy. It's not something that's going to get anybody's attention. Now, if somebody wins a Fortnite match, are they going to write an article about it? No. If they win their 1,000th in a row, then yes, someone's going to write an article about it. We have a big fleet fight in Eve. Nobody gives a shit about that, even if it's in nullsec. But if we break the Guinness World Record, yeah, they're going to write about it. We kill 100 trillion worth, that's $100,000 or $200,000 or $1 million worth of real life money and the back of the napkin exchange rates that we tend to do in this game. Yeah, they're going to write a story about that. Somebody, they write stories about things that happen in Eve that are not common. When you're doing something that is an everyday thing, and you may find it fun, and you may think it's great, and you may think it's very important, it is to you, and that's 100% true. But nobody outside of Eve gives a shit. That's not personal. We're not being personal when we say it. We're just saying flat out. I mean, this is the way that they get a pitch to market the game. Katia say visiting every single system in the game. Well, Brisc, all he did was do jumps. Yes, but he did it like 50,000 times, maybe like 5,000, but still. He did it a lot, and he saw every single system. That's a big deal. You write a story about that. The guys that rob another group of trillions and trillions of ISK, people get robbed every day in EVE of hundreds of millions and billions, and it doesn't make the news. But if it's a long enough story, and if it's got enough detail, and if it's got enough background that's interesting, then yeah, people are going to write stories about it. That's just the nature of the game. So don't get bent out of shape when Dunk says something like that. He's not saying that what you do sucks. He's just saying that when EVE is being marketed by CCP, they're marketing the stuff that is not found in every other game. And that is, number one, these giant fleet fights with thousands of people on both sides. You don't see that in any other game. Sorry, I know that's a nullsec thing, but it's not personal. That's just one of the big things that separates EVE from every other game. All right, I'm off my soapbox on that. Now, you said, I think a couple of the points that I want to go over with you here, I think are pretty good. I think, first of all, you said players have solved the game. That's 100% true. It's 20 years old, right? So when you talk about how they've solved it, what do you mean by that? Do you mean we figured out the fits? We figured out how to fight each other? What's your explanation as exactly what that is?
Well, everything is known. Everything is completely min-maxed. You know exactly how to fit every ship for every burner mission. You know how to fit ships for every region you might want to rat in. You know exactly what's going to happen in every combat anomaly you go to. You know what every escalation is going to be like. Everything is known. It can be planned. It can be worked out. So you have a system in which players completely optimize the game because there's no mystery left. And so what happens is you have this thing where the gap between, if you can run the 10 to 10 escalation perfectly, you're going to make infinite money. If you know how to milk an incursion site properly, you can make all those billions. If you don't, you're at such a huge disadvantage. But most people immediately know how to do everything, and then they fall into what I talk about later in the article is when you're new and you're starting, the gap between what you're capable of and how much revenue you can generate compared to somebody who made their wealth in a previous era is just, it's stark. And it's demoralizing, I think, to a lot of players. And what I have seen personally, it's not everyone's experience, is that about 6 months in after people start playing, they really realize how big a gap they have from where they are and where they could be to what the people they hear in comms every night in some of these larger groups. And it can be demoralizing. They feel like they're never going to get there unless they open their wallet and spend all this money. And we need player retention. We especially need those new players in the first year to feel like they're not grinding all the time and really be in the fun. And I think the last couple of years have made that gap between a new person coming in immediately, being able to have fun, enjoy the game, and not feel at a huge disadvantage. Like that gap has widened over the last couple of years, and I don't see it closing anytime soon. And I want more players in the game. If we had 2 new players joining for every 1 old core player that left, fantastic. That's great. That would be the dream. But that kind of change is not what we're seeing. We're seeing people leave on all ends of the spectrum to the player counts detriment.
Noisy, has that been your experience?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm losing I've kind of lost my enthusiasm, but that happened when the NFT mess started coming. I'd been saying for a couple of years now that EVE really needed an expansion, not just like the little things that we would get every month, but we needed like a real expansion. And I'd been saying that. I was like, because during EVE's heyday, during its big buildup, during the first 10 years, there was an expansion every 6 months. You got something new every 6 months. There was bloat, there was leftover features. CCP wouldn't get back to stuff, but there was that new thing once every 6 months, and you would go there, and people would be excited. And you don't see that anymore. And now it's like, oh, when's CCP going to give us something big? Oh, maybe in October, maybe in November, maybe in December. And it's like, it's summer. We're getting into the doldrums now. August is usually the slowest month of the year anyway. September usually, may or may not be as slow as August. That's historical facts. But yeah, we really need something new to shake things up. I want
to ask you guys both this question, okay? if you talk to CCP, and I'm not suggesting that anybody has or that we've heard it. I mean, one of the things that we, at least on the CSM, we have these back and forth conversations. And one of the things I am always asking them is, are you nervous about anything? Is this bothering you? Are you seeing anything here that you don't like or that you think is a problem? Now, I can't obviously tell you what they say in response to me, but I can tell you this in my time while I've been playing and working on the CSM, I've never really ever felt like the company looked at any things that we see as players and freak out about. They freak out about different things. The stuff we see and freak out about, they don't seem to care much about. The stuff that we don't seem to care much about, they care very much about. And I think that's a fundamental disconnect that results in, I think, a lot of issues with enthusiasm with the players. But I want to ask you guys both, do you think the numbers are down just because it's summer, or do you think there's something bigger that's more fundamental going on here? Noisy, I'll start with you.
You mean, okay, so, the elephant in the room is Russia and Ukraine and that situation, and the geopolitical situation that led to the Russians being cut off from the international monetary system, and that drop of players that happened because of that. Then there's a bunch of other things that have happened. So so when you talk about bigger things, you have that, and that's totally out of CCP's control. Other things, it's that stupid NFT strategy that they were going to go into. They wanted an NFT strategy, and they realized that if they did that, they were going to kill the game, and now they're scrambling. And so until they get back on their feet, we're going to keep seeing this. They need to get back on their feet. They need to have a plan. And as far as I can tell right now, they are scrambling to get a plan.
Dunk, what's your take? Should we be concerned about the player counts now, or is this just summer?
No, I'm concerned. That's why I wrote the article. I mean, I think you have a combination of things that are going on. The increase in subscription price is a real thing. I mean, it affects a lot of people. I'm lucky enough that, I make enough disposable income. It doesn't affect me a lot, but a lot of people, the change makes a big difference. And it may not mean that they stopped playing EVE, but they definitely going from having 3 or 4 accounts to maybe 1 or 2 accounts. So we're seeing, a change because of that. We're seeing just what I call time effort, which is how much time you spend playing the game to do the fun part that you want. Everyone has to grind a little bit in the game to earn what they need to do the fun part that they want. And I think that it's been several years of the value of your time effort you put into the game has been diminished more and more and more. And so people are having to do more now to get to the fun parts of the game that they want. And that's demoralizing. And then again, to the point, we haven't seen a lot of new huge things. The 3 of us have probably been playing long enough that we remember the Apocrypha launch, in which the new scanning technique came in and wormholes became part of the game, and it changed the game. It changed so much about the game. It introduced new things that no one had thought were going to happen because of wormholes. The last major thing we had was the establishment of Pachman, which again, on paper is a good idea, but their restrictions they put on it when it launched just basically kneecapped it and made it unpopular with a lot of people. Then they had to go back in time and undo the restrictions they had put it in place because they were so worried about the economy effect of it, that in a lot of people's head, it's poisoned. They're like, it's too complicated. I don't get it. Getting in and out and standings and drones, and people just don't want to deal with it. So now it's a bailiwick for a specialized group of people that go in there, and it's nowhere near as wide open and as universally utilized as wormholes are. So the last expansion, I would give it like a C, which is Pachman. And there's nothing on the roadmap that's anything even close to something like what wormholes were, what the Citadel transitions were, what the capital rework, creating the split between the carriers and the Force-Hawks was. And the Pachman, there's nothing on the roadmap. I'm excited for the faction war for people to get their fix, but the vast majority of players are not going to have anything to do with this faction war for rewrite that's happening. So again, to emphasize, Noisy's point, we haven't had a real expansion of the game. There's not been a radical thing, what I point out, in the game in 5 years, and something has to energize people. It's just what we're doing right now. People are like, I'm going to go play whatever. Like, there's 1 billion games out there to play. And people are just saying, I'm not going to log in on Monday. And then the next week, I'm not going to log in on Monday or Tuesday. And then the next week, it's like 4 days they don't log in. And then they don't log in at all. And they're playing another game.
Yep.
And that's what I'm seeing over and over. But what I'm not seeing is the new people join at the same rate we're seeing people leave.
I'm throwing up on the screen here right now to talk to Duncan, these guys, about is the price of Plex. This is the price of Plex since middle of April of this year. Look at this number. It has gone out of control. It starts off right here. Let me get my little pen out. You guys can't, I can't see it because I'm not doing a window thing. Starts here on the, I'll see if I can throw my pointer on the screen so you can, so here we are, 3.5 mil back early April. And then the middle of June, it just spikes and it just starts spiking and it keeps going up. And it hit about 3.6, 3.7 in the middle of June. And now we are at the point where one Plex is 4.349 million ISK. That is significantly higher than the worst, like the highest level Plex prices we've ever had issues with, like significantly higher. And I have to say that is part of the problem, because not only did they increase the prices for a lot of different items in the game, including Plex, including subscriptions, the in-game activity is not generating the kinds of Plex that it was before. And demand is up because people don't want to pay the $20. So they'd rather Plex their accounts. The result is demand is up, price goes up. Supply goes down because people aren't paying for Plex to sell to everybody. And boom, we're at 4.3 million. Now, what does that mean? It means that the price to play EVE Online for a month is going up considerably. You need 500 Plex. That's 2 billion ISK now in order to Plex your account for a month. That's 2 billion ISK you have to generate through in-game means if you're doing that. And that means you're playing longer and you're doing stuff more, but you're not doing anything different. You're not doing anything that you hadn't already done before. Everything is the same as it was. So, I mean, I get a little frustrated with the whole focus on scarcity and everything else. Let me pull this off that we had, because we're asking people to either spend more money or more time on the game. And traditionally in games like EVE, money and time are fungible. There, you can switch them. You can skip through the time by spending money, or you can make money by spending time. Now, in the current state of EVE, the amount of money you have to pay is going up, and the amount of time you have to spend is also going up. We're not getting any breaks anywhere. And there's no new content, and we're waiting for the Faction Warfare update, which Doug, I think, rightly said, many players are never going to get a chance to participate in because it's not their thing. And I have to say this, one of the things that scared me the absolute most while we were watching last week when they were talking about the Faction Warfare updates is the potential that this Faction Warfare update in November could launch without the ability of players to enjoy the content and participate in the content without having to leave their current corporation going into a Faction Warfare corporation. They talked about this allegiance system, but the developers publicly would not confirm that it was going to be ready for launch. And I think that's absolutely insane. That is handing everybody, bringing a big piece of cake on a giant platter, putting a lid on top of it, and then not letting you open the lid. It's just going to piss people off. So you guys really need...
very similar. It's just very similar to what happened when Potchman launched,
right? In which
they invested a huge amount to make this available, but the rules that they made to go into Potchman were so complex. The gate standings, the station standings, all of that, they basically made it stillborn, and that's the risk they run with Faction Warfare.
I mean, I from what I have seen, the folks who are in charge of this game economy are deathly afraid of players making money. They are deathly afraid of going back to 2018, 2019, when people were printing money, printing ISK with Rorquals. They were printing ISK with super carriers. There was a ton of stuff that was being generated and flooded into the economy. And honestly, I don't know why. I mean, yeah, we can sit here and say, oh, this sucks. Capital proliferation was bad. This wasn't great. And a lot of the small game guys were the ones that were out there complaining. But guess what? The faucets now are just as high as they were in 2019. It's in different places, and we're not building as much because it costs more. But in terms of ISK generation, there's tons of ISK entering the game. And as we look at every MER, and as we finally get, and thank God for this, and I'm going to give CCP a bit of an attaboy. CCP Estimate is the man. He is out there putting together good MERs, and I'm not. This is not saying anything bad about CCP Larrikin, but CCP Estimate is making the MER his own thing. We're adding in new stuff. We're getting to see things we couldn't see before. And when we ask, and when players like Riv and Noisy and the rest ask for specific, and Angry Mustache ask for specific screens, we get them. So thank you, CCP Estimate. You are the man. You are providing us with the data that we need to tell you what we think the problem is. And I'll tell you this right now, the problem has always been and will continue to be player activity. And if you think and you are concerned and you are at CCP and your biggest worry is the players have too much ISK, wrong. That is never a problem. That is an easy problem to fix. You can add a new faucet whenever you want. You can put new stuff in the game. You can create new things that people will spend money on to get it out of the economy. That's easy to solve. And that's why I have always been concerned when they focus on the supply side and not the demand side, when they focus on income generation and reducing that and nerfing that, when they really just need to give us new things to buy so that we're spending the money that we're generating. No one cares. If I'm making $1 billion ISK every day, but I have something to spend $1 billion ISK on, then there's no issue. The problem is I've bought everything I wanted to buy. There's nothing I have left. I don't need to spend my money because what am I going to spend it on? Well, Brisc, you get a Titan. I already got one. You get a Super. I already got one. You get Dreads. I already got one. You could get the blinged out trick shot. I already got them. I got a Marshall. I got all this stuff. Most players, veteran players in particular, got theirs 2 or 3 years ago, and all they're doing now is playing off the proceeds of what they made. And the result is, come on, guys, give us something new. And we're not getting that. But what you are doing is taking away the things that we did that we like to do that made us money. And I'll tell you this, people don't like to think about it, but there's a dopamine hit when you see the numbers keep going up. That's what gets you in Vegas. It's what gets you in the stock market. It's what gets you in the lottery. People like seeing numbers go up. You stop the numbers going up so fast, enthusiasm wanes. This is not a hard concept, is it, gentlemen?
You would think it wouldn't be, but I mean the numbers going up. Part of that is CCP and the way that they apparently changed the way that they evaluated the health of EVE when Perlvis. You never heard Hilmar talk about monthly average users and daily average users until after the sale, and so you've got CCP looking at. Did everybody freeze? Did I freeze?
No, you're good. Keep going. You're fine.
Okay. Right. So so CCP is evaluating. Stuff not based on player activity. They're doing it based on our players logging into the game. And if you take a look at players logging into the game, I look like the most hardcore player of EVE because I log 3 accounts in every day in order to get my Omega rewards. But I maybe only play on 2 of those accounts really, and I only undock 1 of those accounts. So so I think that there's that disconnect just on the way that CCP went from looking at user engagement the way that we used to before the sale to this average user stuff like Blizzard does after the sale. And I think that's part of the problem.
Now, Dunk, we're gonna wrap up this segment because I want to get to this, and then I want to talk about Rick Javic's response article real quick. But you threw out two super radical solutions that are both heretical, but you say have been pinging around in your head for a while. One of them was wipe the server. The other was collapse space. You want to talk a little bit about those? Because I guess a lot of people got bent out of shape with both of these suggestions.
Well, I think, maybe my point was lost is I was trying to give an example of what radical change looked like. Radical change isn't nerfing the Munin or getting rid of ansiplexes. That's not radical. Radical change is stuff that fundamentally changes the nature of the game, like we saw with wormholes being introduced, right? And so I gave two examples of what I consider radical things. Now, me personally, I wouldn't mind either one of those things happening, right? I know a ton of people that's anathema, right? That they don't want to see that at all. But I gave two examples to make people think about what a radical change might look like, which is what I feel is needed. I wasn't proposing it. I think the first thing I say is, this is impossible and it will never happen about each of those things in the article. But I think people's blood pressure went so high when they just read the paragraph heading that they immediately, they missed that. So, I just think, look, I love playing Eve. I like playing with Eve players. I'm going to an Eve meetup in LA tonight. It's not for me just about my alliance, the group I play with. It's about all Eve players. I want the game to be fun, and I want new people coming into the game. And that's what my concern is. And my concern is after 18, 19 years, we need a radical thing, a subtle change, which is everything you see recommended on Reddit are subtle, teeny changes. Yep. And something big needs to happen. Or I think we're going to continue with all these pressures, Russia, price of Plex, like all these things are going to continue to kind of have that player count go down, which at some point, we reach like it'll fail scade, in other words.
And I mean, to Noise's point before, when we're talking about Apocrypha and some of the other big expansions, the argument that I've always heard back whenever we talk about new expansions and new things is, well, there's already too much stuff to do in Eve. And I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. That's not wrong. And that I think is 100% true. That there's so much different stuff that you can do in this game. It gets to the point, like, it's like when you walk up to the menu at the sushi bar and there's like 200 different things you can order. You're like, how am I even going to get started in what I want here? And you're so scared that you're going to pick 3 things at the top and miss something you really like at the bottom that it takes you like 15 minutes to figure out what you're going to order, and I think that's part of the problem with Eve is that we have this situation where there's so much to do that nobody can ever do it all. And when they have done it all, they're 16-year-old vets and they only like doing one thing after a while. And then they get bored and they say things like, oh, there's nothing to do. That's never true. No one can ever say there's nothing to do in Eve. There's too much to do in Eve. But I don't think that precludes the idea that giving us something new that's new and actually cool would be a bad thing. And I think that's one area where I hope that the devs will start thinking outside of the box, because like Dunk said, and like Noisy pointed out, a lot of the different things that we see, at least in terms of recommendations from the players, are just, we're not thinking radically. We're thinking within the sphere of what's possible in Eve. We're not thinking of what can we do that would be cool. And there's no reason why we can't expect a little bit of that coming out of the blue. Say, hey, look, we're going to give you something completely different that you've never had in Eve before. And we're going to do it. And we're actually going to get it done. And we're going to develop it. And it'll be part of Eve. And it'll be fun. As opposed to what they do now, which seems like everything becomes a second game. Oh, we got to do the FPS game. Oh, we're going to do this other game. Oh, we're going to do the VR game. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this Eve on the toilet game. We're going to do all these different things. It'll be great. But it takes away resources from the main game that we would like to see created for tranquility. Why can't we do that? And the funny part is, when we talk about some of these things, like, and we're going to get there in a little bit, we're going to go to this next. Dunk talks about things that are heretical, like collapsing space. Well, it's not heretical for everybody because the Chinese are doing it. So obviously there's things out there we can think about that I think sometimes maybe it's better for us to like push CCP to think outside of the box and not to assume that something is sacred if it's not really sacred. I mean, as long as they don't take away the player sandbox and player agency in the game and make sure that it's still PvP oriented where loss matters. You hit all those things. As long as it doesn't take away from that, which unfortunately is some of what the Chinese server, the new server is going to do. If you don't take away those 4 things, I don't think you're going to get a ton of pushback from a lot of people because I think a lot of us are looking for new stuff. But anyway, really quickly. So in response to Dunk's post, Rick Javix wrote a long one. And I thought, to a certain extent, I thought he wasn't really being fair to Dunk. Because I think he says in here, you know, he's not going to argue or debate the points that Dunk brings up in his column, and then he does that. You know, and I read this thing the whole way through. And the one thing that stuck out to me, and I think it stuck out to Dunk as well, I'll get his feedback after I tell you what I thought was, a lot of the stuff that he's talking about, a lot of the issues that he sees with the game have nothing to do with the company or the mechanics. They have to do with us, with you and me. We're not playing the game the way he thinks we should play it, or he thinks we're complaining about the game instead of doing something about it inside the game. Like, oh, you don't think there are enough wars? Go start one. Or, oh, you don't think you have too many Titans? Well, whose fault is that? Why did you buy them? Or why aren't you using them? Why aren't you losing them and stuff? And I've never really liked the blaming the players for the state of the game kind of thing. Because for the most part, yes, this is a game that requires content generation and we all get out there and we do stuff. But if I'm logging in and I'm playing the game every day, am I not doing the right thing? Should I not be doing that? I feel like at some point I am paying for an experience. The company takes my money and promises to provide me that experience. That is the point of games. You can say, no, they're only providing you access to the server. You have to figure out what you want to do with it and everything. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, they have content in this game. They do things. They have mechanics. They create the tools that we use to tell our stories. If the tools suck and nobody's writing stories because the tools suck, that's not my fault. That's not Dunk or Noisy's fault. That's not Darkshine's fault. That's not Pando's. That's not Gobbin's fault. If we are not given the tools we need to do things that are fun, then we can't do things that are fun. And just because we did them in the past doesn't mean we have the ability to do them in the future. And that's another thing, you know. So I thought his article, which wasn't really fair. And then, of course, the end of it, which frustrated me the most, is he says this, which is, frankly, oh my God, just stop already. Steve, fixing Eve is easy. There's nothing easy about fixing Eve, okay? But you, the players reading this, you don't want any of that. You're already finding fault in those suggestions, aren't you? Well, yeah, I am, because your suggestions are dog shit. I mean, these are not good suggestions. And unlike Dunk, he's saying actually do this. He's saying have one player-owned structure per system. Eliminate all war decks. Make high-sec completely green with no PvP in it. Kill Sinos and all the jump bridges. No more Sinos, no more jump gates. 24-hour API feed on Zkill and kill all the kill the bots. Everybody agrees with that. But like, this is all stuff he's saying you should do. No, you shouldn't do any of this shit. This is not good. So yeah, I'm going to say this stuff sucks. And it's not because I'm a CCP apologist, which I'm not. And it's not because I'm afraid of radical change, which I am not. Because I think we all know it's necessary. It's because none of this stuff is going to help anything. None of this stuff gets players in space. Making the game more tedious, making it hard to move around, does not get people to play the game. It makes them put off playing the game because they don't want to have to do the work in order to play. If I know that if I want to go have a war against Pandemic Horde, that before we can even start fighting, I've got to spend 3 weeks doing back-to-back-to-back move ops every single day to get everybody's stuff up to where we can actually be in range to fight each other, then yeah, no wonder it takes forever to start a war in Eve. I mean, come on. Like, that's not fun. That is what Dunk loves to call
weaponized inconvenience.
Boom. Weaponized inconvenience. That's what that is. That's not fun. That's not supposed to be the thing. You shouldn't have to put in 15 hours of work to get an hour's worth of fun gameplay. But that's the nature of Eve, unfortunately. And they're not working on fixing that. And we have players who are suggesting that they make it worse, because apparently that's the solution, because that's what we had 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have an iPad. I didn't have a Nintendo Switch. I didn't have televisions in every room in my house. I didn't have 30,000 streaming services. I didn't have a Kindle with the sum total of every book written in the palm of my hand either. The shit we put up with 15 years ago, 10 years ago even, is completely different, because this was the option. We played Eve. We played video games on our desktop computers that had big screens that weighed 20 pounds because they were all tubes. I mean, just the idea that we can go back in time to solve all these problems just drives me crazy. But we hear it all the time, don't we, gentlemen?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm done bitching about that. We are moving on, because I want to talk to Noisy, because I think all of us are concerned about the state of CCP's finances, because they have a direct impact on the state of the game. We had Pearl Abyss's second quarter 2022 earnings call earlier this week. So after I push this button, we do our little intro to Piercing the Corporate Veil. We're going to talk about that with our guest, Noisy Gamer. All right. This was from the period April 1st through June 30th of 2022. Noisy, what's interesting about this quarter?
Oh, geez. Okay, so what's interesting about this quarter is it's the first quarter after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which impacted a whole bunch of stuff. It is interesting because Pearl Abyss managed to have an operating loss, but had a net profit of 32 billion won. Those are two very unusual things, and I'll wait until later to talk about what's going to happen in Q3.
And that's to me was one of the things, and you and I talked about this quite a bit, and this is weird to me, because they go from a negative operating profit year over year. They increased, and then it went down a little bit, but now they're in a loss. They're actually taking a loss, but their net profit is huge. And they explained some of it away as, well, we got a big refund from the Korean version of Uncle Sam. We got a big tax refund, and we're also taking the benefit of currency exchanges where the won is weak and the dollar is strong, and other currencies are moving around. And that got them that operating profit. I don't know how it's just kind of crazy, right?
Okay. And then the loss. I didn't tell you about the loss. So the operating loss, if you notice, there was an operating loss in the second quarter of 2021. Apparently, there is a employee incentive program that's going to wind up ending in the first quarter of 2023. And so they make all these payouts because there's these incentives, and that produces the operating loss. That's what they explained.
Okay.
And they also explained that it shouldn't happen next year during the second quarter, because analysts were asking about that. How is this? Is this a structural thing that's going to happen in the future? And that was their explanation.
You would think that if they had some kind of an incentive program that consistently tanked their operating revenue or operating profits in a single quarter, that maybe they would kind of like do something about that. Dunk, would you do that in real life?
If the stock market is unhappy with you, you're in for a bad time.
It's not good. It's not good. So looking at Eve, okay, here is Eve. I'll throw back to the screen here. This was the Eve numbers. So 17.6 billion won. That's about what, $15.3 million. What's do you know the number off the top of your head?
As of the last day of the second quarter, it was 15 million even.
Okay. All right. So about 15 million. As you can see, it's the lowest in the last 4 quarters. And frankly, if I recall correctly, and let me throw this up on the screen, this was the numbers that you had given me before. This is all of the quarters since first quarter of 2019. You can see here in terms of millions that 13 and a half, and you're down below pretty much every other quarter that we've had since second quarter 2020. Second quarter 2020 was the start of COVID. And in third quarter 2020, when the number spikes to 18.2, was the launch of Echoes in China. So this includes all the IPs. This is the worst quarter that they've had since COVID and since they launched Echoes. That's not great. Now, it's not a huge difference. It's only about $2.5 million for the quarter, but this comes, as Noisy noted, after Russia gets cut out and after they raise the prices. And part of the point of the price increase was to stabilize their revenue. Does that look stable? Is that, I mean, did you guys expect something like that?
I kind of expected something like that. Not only, okay, so we have the crazy currency valuations, or not crazy. We just have the U.S. dollar just going nuts. It's become the Chad currency in the world, and so you had the price increases, but then at the same time you have the euro losing value against the U.S. dollar. You've got the British pound. You've got the Chinese yuan. These are these are 3 of the biggest markets that play EVE outside the United States. So you have them, increasing the payments or increasing their prices, but then you have the currency decreasing that amount in real life. And what happens is that Pearl Abyss Iceland, which is what CCP is called in the business world, Pearl Abyss Iceland, whenever they get their funds, so you pay for Plex, you pay for your Omega account, they convert that money immediately into USD. And then from there, Pearl Abyss Iceland then reports the funds to Pearl Abyss HQ in Anyang, South Korea. So you have that. And so then they somehow do their calculation, and then we try to recalculate it, and you see all this weird stuff. And so the numbers that we're looking at are kind of like a guesstimate at this point. And it makes it all worse if you try to say, well, this much money means this many players, because the currency valuations are different. Like, for example, over the course of the second quarter of 2022, the euro decreased 6.8% versus the dollar. The British pound decreased by 8.3% versus the dollar. The Chinese yuan went down 5.5%. So you can increase your prices, but then if the market decides, well, the money that you're being paid in is decreasing in value, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what happened. We know what happened to Russia, and they got cut out of the international finance system, the SWIFT system. So we know what happened there. But what's happening in the U.S. and what's happening in Europe, that's a whole different story.
Exactly. Now, this was not the biggest and most important thing that we saw in this announcement. So let me run back here. So we talked about the numbers. We talked about what they highlighted as the second quarter, which was FanFest, EVE Evolved, which was really just an announcement, by the way, and the Air Career Program, which they've been continually doing. So I have to say, I wonder at some point that they just said, hey, can you guys give us 3 things that you did this quarter so we can stick it on this slide? And that's what they did. And I'm sure that if any of the reporters had asked the guys at PA what any of this stuff meant, they would have no idea. But the important thing that came out of this was on the last slide where they talk about third quarter 22, what the highlights are going to be. First of all, the easy one, we're getting the Spanish localization in third quarter. Great. We knew that was coming. I'm glad that they finally gave us like a date. They talked about it at FanFest, but we didn't have an exact date. So now we know it's coming sometime in the third quarter. But look at this. A new China server. New server. This is crazy. Now, what do we know about this new server? Well, we know a little bit about this new server because they made some announcements about what the new server is going to be. And some of the things that they are including is pretty crazy. They're calling it Eve New Dawn is the name of this announcement. And they're NetEase and CCP are talking about, they brought the New Eden universe back to everybody in April 2020. They've been talking to players. They've been getting feedback, suggestions by capsuleers. They've been looking at a bold series. And what they're going to do is they're going to make a bunch of changes to the game. So many that they're going to launch a second server in China for the Chinese players. And some of the things that they're going to be changing, they are changing the layout of space. And we'll show you what that's going to look like. They are changing safety adjustment in nullsec. They're going to be changing. Not nullsec. In the Gauan, that I believe is highsec. That's the highsec area. That's highsec. They are going to be locking out. They're going to be doing what Rick's asked for, which is to make highsec completely PvP empty. There will be no PvP in highsec on this new server. There'll be new alliance system. More attempts in the universe will try to adjust alliance composition. Each alliance can be composed of at most 4 corporations. And each corporation can only have 255 characters in it. That's going to be interesting. I guess there's going to be a lot of coalitions in the new server in China. There's more value for ships that are not being there. They're going to provide bonuses and things to new ships. They're going to create. Says flexible combinations of ships may produce different chemical reactions. I don't know what that means, but it sounds to me like you're going to be able to merge 2 or 3 ships together to get a different ship. So they're going to do mutaplasmids for ships, it sounds like. Star Express recovery service, which is, I have to say, they said they're not changing anything fundamental in Eve. This is a fundamental change.
This is completely wackadoodle when you hear it.
In the new universe, the Star Express recovery service will restore the hull, assembly, and drones, the hull, the fit, and all the drones, excluding cargo, for pilots in their last dock space station after the ship is destroyed, and all they have to do is pay the insurance fee and wait a little while, and they get their fucking ship back.
Welcome to Star Citizen.
There is nothing Eve about getting stuff back when you die, unless you go loot it yourself. That is insane. We hope that this change will greatly alleviate the frustration of new players after the death of their ship and a return to battle. It's cumbersome and completely avoids the catastrophic consequences of putting all your eggs in one basket from the mechanic. That's Eve. What the hell is wrong with you people? Like, the fact that this is a game where you can lose all your stuff makes it unique. You're taking away one of the unique things. Now, it's just Star Citizen, basically. So, if you look over here, we have a map of, this is the map. This is what they're doing. This is what the map is going to look like on the China server. Here's all big green donut. Well, not all of it. This is all of nullsec, most of nullsec in the middle. Then you got all of low sec and high sec is all on the outside here. And then the forge is up in the corner where the drones would normally be. Iridia and Genesis and Corazor are where Delve should be. Like they've completely, like they've taken the map of New Eden and flipped it on the outside. It's weird. And I don't know how all these connections are going to work, but it's just a very interesting way to do things that I'm kind of surprised to see. And it looks like they've removed some systems because I don't see Delve on this map anywhere. Oh, there it is. Never mind. It's right here. So that's some of the stuff they're doing. It just...
Oh, they're removing like half the systems.
Right. So half the systems in space are gone as well. So, I mean, you want to talk about radical change. Well, guys, guess what? NetEase is doing something for CCP. They're providing them with a roadmap for what to do. And this is a fresh server. People are going to get a chance to start the game fresh over again and start it with this new system where you have this trammel area that's all high sec where no one can attack you, where you get your ship back when you die as long as you bought the insurance, and you wait a little while. And the map is completely different. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because I get the feeling if this works, some of these bad ideas are going to show up potentially if it works. Now, granted, again, to be clear, this is not CCP doing this. This is NetEase doing it in China. CCP owns the IP. NetEase does the programming. NetEase does all the work. They're the ones that are responsible for the server development. So just because it happens in China does not mean it's ever going to happen on TQ. But I think we would all be crazy if we did not assume that the folks in Reykjavik are going to be looking very closely at what the folks in Shanghai are doing and are going to pay attention and see. And if this works out pretty good, maybe we look at those ideas for Eve. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous. Not going to lie.
Do you remember when CCP came out and said that they weren't going to touch TQ, and that was with the NFT and all the other stuff? They never said anything about starting a second server in the global area outside China.
Nope, they didn't. And you know what's funny? I'm willing to bet that if people had the opportunity, as Dunk said, if they had the opportunity to play Eve Classic or to go back and play a different version of the game, maybe a 2013 version, 2014 version of the game, I frankly would have no problems with it. Go ahead and let us set up a new server and let it be fresh and let everybody go try Eve the way it was back in 2014. Because maybe that will finally shut up all the people that think the game was better back then than it is now, because it wasn't. More tedious in a lot of ways. And I always say this, and I try to remind everybody, guys, this is not the game. When you think back to all the good times you had back in the game in the day, almost none of it was because of mechanics. It was because of who you were playing with, at least in my opinion. Dunk, is that you? Do you agree with that, or would you say it's mechanics driven?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, I think, definitely what it was like to play when My Alliance was brand new was a very different era that can't be duplicated. But also some of the mechanics we have in the game now make the game, I personally don't like skynetting fighters. It doesn't seem like it's very Eve to me. So I think it's a mix of things. But look, with the changes they're proposing for the China server, like, I don't like the get the ship back if you pay. I don't really like that. But I wouldn't mind the map flip. If they do the map flip tomorrow on Tranquility, I would be like, hey, it's a new adventure. I have new neighbors. Let's see how it goes. So I don't think everything they're doing over there for the China server is bad. Mm-hmm. I mean,
the map flip would be interesting. I'd like to see that. I think the reduction in the size of alliances and corporations is meaningless. It doesn't matter because they're third-party tools that will let people put stuff. You will have a goon swarm of 30,000 people in China if they want it. Yeah, there'll be multiple different alliances: Goon Swarm A, Goon Swarm B, Goon Swarm C, and all the different corporations will be in each different group. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Of course, people are going to do that. You can't. Life will find a way. In other words, there's no way you're around. You're going to find this stuff. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I don't think that's going to work out very well. But the map thing is interesting. And
I will say this about the past. The past, even in people's outside of Eve live, right? The past can seem like it was a great time. I had a great time when I was in college, or I had a great time this then. And in Eve, you can remember having a great time in some of the past eras of things like that because you remember all the positive moments. But for those of you that were there in the past, repping a POS for hours on end, like there was a lot of stuff in the past that was not fun that you may have forgotten about because you tried to blank that pain out of your memory. It wasn't all wine and roses, 10 years ago, but people tend to forget all the stuff that was painful back then.
Yep. All right. So as we get to the end of the show, we didn't get a chance to talk about any of the stuff going on. Doc, you guys had a fun fight yesterday. You killed the Knicks. I just want to ask you briefly at the end of the show before we get out of here, can you tell us a little about what's going on in the war with fraternity up north? Because I'm interested in hearing about it. It seems like you guys are holding your own. What can you tell me?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting war. It basically started for Brave when we were told by the Winterco they want us to stay out of helping defend Volta GTC, which, as I've said before, would basically make us, pets or vassals of Winterco, which is not what we want to do. When we moved to Pure Blind, leaders of every major group in the game knew what we were doing, talked to them, and everyone liked the idea of Brave being a neutral group. And I think everybody liked the idea that we were a buffer between some of the empires. And so we're fighting because we decided we didn't want to be a part of this coalition. What we're facing is difficult to deal with. This is a mega coalition in Winterco. They have brought some friends along to help them. So it's a relentless push on them. You saw in the fight yesterday, I think people had fun, which is what the game is about. But when they're bringing, dozens and dozens of supers and carriers and Skynetting them across to kill a Fortizar, there's no great tactic to defend against that. I'm glad we were able to bump one Nix off. I feel bad for that individual pilot because they just randomly got selected. But the game is fun. We're having fun fighting. How the war is going to go, I don't know. But I mean, Brave is fighting a group that far outnumbers us, has a lot more money to throw around, is willing to bring in entire alliances to help them to do this stuff. So it's not easy for us, but we're going to fight. We're going to walk the walk we said of trying to maintain our independence. We'll see what the next few months bring. But I wasn't able to play in the fight, but my people were like, hey, we had fun. I don't like tie-dye, but they had fun. They had fun killing the Knicks, all that kind of stuff. I hope the fraternity and Test and Deepwater people had fun too. But as far as a war going on, it's a lot of time zone tanking. It's nowhere near the kind of complete head-to-head kind of battles we're seeing in the South with kind of the Pan Fam and the Imperium going at it.
You definitely are having a lot of fun with the propaganda. And again, I love it. Whenever Brave wins something, Reddit gets filled up with awesome propaganda. Some of it is obviously like a little, quick and dirty, but some of this stuff is funny. I just like, these are just good. I have to say, I love it when Brave wins because you guys flood the zone with all the good propaganda and I laugh about it. So that would make me very happy. And I think, hey, this is the kind of thing where they're giving up, losing 113 billion ISK to kill 64 billion ISK. That's fine. You can do that and they can do it all they want. I like the fact that you guys are fighting and you're bloodying their noses and you're making them pay for it. And that's good. That's what I like to see. So be brave, stay classy. We like it. All right, gentlemen, we're at the end of the show. There's one thing I have to do left, but I will get your last words before I do my last thing. Noisy, do you have any parting shots for the audience before we get out of here?
Not really a parting shot. Just, go out there, behave yourselves, don't get banned. Don't do things that are gonna that may get scripted and sent in the CCP and get you banned. And not only you banned, but maybe some of your friends banned by, just because you're with them. So just go out there and be classy.
There you go. Doc, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I sent you a graphic, Brisc, if you get ready to put that up.
Yeah.
So now, as long as I'm playing Eve, I have been fighting for putting change in the game that helps people do things in the game that's really not super combat related and unbalancing. So I have fought for hull repair bots, which were a big change on Brave's first birthday. The devs announced hull repair bots because we want them for bosses. I fought for years to get T2 salvage drones into the game, which happened. It was amazing. I also fought for the primate to have a role that was recently rebalanced, in which it has an additional role and hangars to use on the ship. But the next thing I'm going to be pushing for, and I need all your help in this, is to let us build command centers. Now, if you don't know, command centers are essential for doing PI, and right now you can only get the command centers by hauling them in from NPC stations, and you should be able to make those wherever you are because they're so cheap in the game. They're like 100,000 ISK, but the size of them is gigantic, and so it makes it very difficult to haul them in. So let's give players agency. Let us build command centers. Look, make them cost $1 million, make them cost 10 million. Add something, a new thing to do, and just put a blueprint in the game where you can make these, and away we go, and people will be happy, and you won't be having your jump freighters filled with command centers so much anymore. That's my rant. I
think that's a great idea, and I think for those people who are out there who like space trucking, there's always going to be a reason for space trucking in EVE. But for those of us who would rather not have to be space truckers, this would be helpful. That would get me into space to pew pew a little bit faster. So that'd be nice. So can we please get that? I like it. All right. So the last thing I want to do, and I want to highlight this because I can't go without at least noticing it because it was a big deal for me and for a lot of you people. We had a patch day. And two massively important things happened on the patch day. First of all, one, new desolate asteroid belts. We are in one of these right now on the show. As you can see it in the background. Were added in every nullsec system. They'll serve as an additional spawn point for asteroid NPCs. With systems with no belts, they'll serve as the only spawn point for asteroid NPCs, officers, and commanders. In nullsec, asteroid NPCs no longer spawn on gates. We finally got them to fix the fucking gate rats a year and a half after they put them in. Now, if you have watched the Meta Show for a while, you know my mantra. When somebody does something that you ask them to do, and they do it, you say thank you. So thank you, CCP. And I will do my best not to rub in the fact that this was a completely avoidable problem if you just hadn't gotten rid of asteroid belts in the first place, just saying. But thank you. And the second thing, and this is a huge thing that I hope everybody noticed, and they didn't really talk about it because it wasn't in the original patch notes. They had to add it afterwards because they forgot. That is, they removed the jump clone cooldown when swapping a clone in the NPC stations. This was huge. I cannot tell you how huge this is, okay? In Citadels, when you want to switch out of clones, you just hit jump and boom, you're in the clone. You can switch out and make sure that you're not leaving your station in, say, your Titan pod and then getting blown up because you forgot about it or because you can't jump into it because you have a timer. You can do that in Citadels. In NPC stations, which is one of the reasons why people don't like staging in NPC stations and why it's hard to stage in places like Thera, where there are only NPC stations, or Pochvin, where there's only NPC stations, unless you can find a free port that's not blown up yet, was because you couldn't swap out your clones without blowing your 24-hour jump clone timer. They fixed it. Now, stations and Citadels are treated the same. This is huge. It's better for small gangs when they're out fighting in NPC nullsec, where they have a place to go, and they can stage out of those without needing to drop a structure that'll get blown up by the big guys. And it has all the same stuff that they can do in a structure. If you're in Thera, you want to use that as your base of operations, which I do because it's so fucking convenient. You can put a bunch of clones in there and pick the clone that you want and go roam in that clone. And if it dies, whatever. But then you don't have to worry about like not being able to jump in and out or jump back to fleets. If you get a ping and you got to go fight and do what you got to do in nullsec. The small gang guys should like it. Everybody should like it. If you are a high sec guy and you want to put your clone in the station, great. You don't have to worry about blowing your timer. And maybe it's not a big deal if you're not jump cloning around a lot, but a lot of us are. I'm very pleased with this. This was 100% quality of life, big time win for CCP. And you throw all of the different stuff in here that they did, other than a handful of things that they screwed up. which happens every patch. This was probably one of the best received patches that they've done in a while. So thank you, CCP. We appreciate it. Now, finish the faction warfare stuff and the heraldry stuff and make sure the allegiance system works and stop ruining the game otherwise. Thank you. I hope that wasn't, I hope no one thinks that me being thankful that they do the things we ask them to do sometimes is being an apologist, because it's not. I just want to make sure that we're fair to CCP when they do the right thing, so that in the future they will want to do the right thing some more. So thank you, CCP. You got it right this time. Gentlemen, thank you. This has been the Meta Show for August the 13th, 2022. Dunk Dinkle of Brave Collective was my guest co-host today. Noisy Gamer joined us with his lovely, lovely, lovely analysis of all the Pearl Abyss stuff. Gentlemen, thank you guys for joining. Dunk wants you all to stay classy, and as I want to say, you stay classy, newbie. See you next time.